Okay, Carol, take it away.
Thank you. And welcome. Welcome to this third session of our Faith and Food Justice series. And I want to welcome to those who are joining us for the first time, as well as to those who have been with us in September and October. And a special welcome to you, Dr. Mary McGann, Sister Mary. So special welcome. So I am Sister Carol D'Angelo, Director of Peace, Justice, and Integrity of Creation for the Sisters of Charity of New York. And you know Terry, Father Terrence Moran, who is the Director of Peace, Justice, and Ecological Integrity for the Sisters of Charity of Saint Elizabeth. And both of us are very happy to host this Faith and Justice series. So I'd like to take just a moment to recall why Terry and I decided to host this series. Last April, the Sisters of Charity of New York and Sisters of Charity of St. Elizabeth held a joint assembly, an historic first. At that assembly, both congregations committed to an assembly proposal that said, we will go together into the future by living the vision of Laudato Si, by reducing our carbon footprint, especially with the focus on food print. And we saw a Faith and Food Justice series as one way to explore and unpack the meaning and implications of this assembly proposal. Our food print connects us to others, to people and other than humans, to the land, to the air and water. And the more we are aware, the more we can use our power as consumers and buyers of food to affect positive change. The food we buy and eat becomes part of us and connects us to farm and factory workers who face unhealthy and unsafe conditions. Food connects us to the plight of small rural farmers, to the polluted water, land, and air caused by toxic waste from factory farms and chemicals. What and how we eat impacts our spirituality, our health, and the quality of our lives. And the food choices we make impact our faith and the climate crises. And as Catholic Rural Life's posters said many years ago, eating is a moral act. So before I introduce Terry, I just want to remind ourselves that our last session is Monday, December 4th, and our guest speaker will be Father Dave Hamilton at Sisters Hill Farm, a Sisters of Charity of New York ministry. And so, Terry, I invite you now to lead us in the opening prayer and to introduce Mary McGann. And after Mary's presentation, we will have the privilege of asking you questions, Mary, and also sharing and having conversation with you and others. Thank you.
Carol, you just called Dave Hambleton father, so.
Oh my goodness. Well, he is a father of two great boys.
That's right, but that's not usually what comes to mind with that title. So for our opening prayer for this session, I'm going to just use some intercessions from a book that some of you are probably familiar with, Table Graces, Prayers Reflecting the Earth Charter Principles by a Franciscan sister, Janice Welly. It came out a number of years ago. And I think they sum up very well what we're about this evening. So we'll just listen to these with a brief pause for silence between them. We and all we eat are made from stardust. Look closely and see that the patterns within our food are also patterns of the stars of the universe. As we recognize our interconnectedness, we express gratitude for our abundance. Blessed are we. To the Holy One, we offer our thanks. Lead us to respect through our thoughts, words, and actions the Earth's infinite life forms, Endow us with a deeper reverence for the wisdom and dignity of our elders. Empower us to do our part in building peaceful and just societies. Lavish us with generous spirits to pass the new story to future generations. Fill us with grateful hearts, that we might generously share our abundance with those less fortunate. Call us to more stillness, more quiet moments in our daily lives. As our earth moves further away from the life-giving sun, our daylight shortens and darkness lengthens. Despite the shift of energy, we have nutritious food before us. How grateful we are to receive these blessings of life. Amen. So it's a great pleasure now for me to welcome Sister Mary McGann, who is a religious of the Sacred Heart of Mary and is adjunct professor of liturgical studies at the Jesuit School of Theology, the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. Mary began her academic career, I guess, with studies in liturgy and music. And that's reflected in two wonderful earlier books of hers, Let It Shine, The Emergence of African American Catholic Worship, and A Precious Fountain, Music and the Worship of an African American Catholic Community. And of course, what prompted our invitation to her for this series tonight is her most recent book, The Meal That Reconnects, Eucharistic Eating and the Global Food Crisis, that was published in 2020. It's a masterful stew, if you'll pardon the food metaphor, of scripture, science, spirituality, sociology, and how they all intersect on the plate that we put in front of us on our tables every day. So welcome, Mary, and we look forward to your presentation and to the dialogue that will follow.
Thank you so much to both of you, Carol and Terry. I'm delighted to be with you all tonight and hope that what I can offer will build on what you've already been doing in this series. So my title is The Contribution of Plant-Based Eating to Greater Food Justice. Let me take a moment to share my screen and then I'll move on from the title. Is that ready to go? Yes. Okay, so my presentation tonight has two main focuses that are deeply related. Wait, we're not quite right yet because this isn't going to move forward. Let me do that one more time, please. Okay. Here we go. So first, I want to introduce and explore with you an approach to food justice that I call intersectional food justice, by which I mean a commitment to enable justice and healing to flow through the many relationships that comprise the food webs in which we live. Relationships with one another through the sharing of food, with the earth and the soil and the seeds, that determine where and how food is grown and distributed, who has access and why, how our choices of food impact our common home, and how food relates us to other sentient creatures and to future generations. My second focus is on the choice of plant-based eating and the specific contribution of plant-based centered food choices to intersectional food justice. How plant-rich eating can bring greater justice and healing to an aggravated climate, can create greater human health and increase the availability of food, can make way for cleaner water and protective forests, can provide greater compassion in our relationships with all sentient animals, especially those grown and slaughtered to feed humans. Intersectional food justice is rooted in the common good, in an understanding that the food resources of this planet belong to all and are meant for all, that personal decisions about food choices, such as the option for a plant-rich diet, affect the whole community of life and impact the availability of food for others in the human community. By focusing on relationships that are broken, damaged, fractured, or suffering, intersectional food justice notes how persons suffering in one aspect of the food web are most likely impacted by other relationships. For example, urban communities of color deprived of local access to nutritious and abundant food sources are likewise bearing the brunt of climate disruption in their places of residence. In taking up the choice of plant-centered eating, let me lay out a few key dimensions. At heart, this is a diet abundant with fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains, beans, pulses, and legumes of every kind, that provides multiple forms of plant-based protein and a broad range of wonderfully nutritious foods that provide an alternative to the highly meat-centered and processed Western diet, which is on the rise today around the globe. This diet is not equivalent, in my mind, to a vegan one, because a vegan diet can include a multitude of processed foods, meagerly nutritious, if at all, and often filled with additives that are less than healthy. Plant-rich eating, in contrast, is focused on whole foods, primarily organic, natural foods derived from plant sources that are unrefined, or at least minimally refined, and free from animal ingredients. One of the deep justice concerns that flows from a plant-based option is the need for broad access to organic foods, especially in urban settings and among communities of color who are often deprived of healthy options. Sourcing organic choices grown close to people's homes from seeds that are not genetically modified, in soil naturally fertilized, and with foods picked for ripeness and seasonality, could provide deep nutrition and enable communities to enjoy the best of God's edible creation. Plant-centered eating situates eaters low on the food chain, recognizing our human place in the planet's food webs, not as a pinnacle species set apart and above, but related to all other species and deeply connected in what one author calls a multi-species communion of life, a way of living in greater solidarity with our fellow creatures, both human and other than human. Eating lower on the food chain by its nature can encourage new healing and well-being to flow through relationships in the food system that are currently fractured and unhealthful. It can likewise situate us closer to neighbors, fellow citizens, both global and local, whose food choices are restricted because of economic or social marginalization. In what follows, I will explore how a choice of plant-based eating can contribute to intersectional food justice, a justice that is aligned with the calls made by Pope Francis in Laudato Si and Laudate Deum. But before we do that, let's just take a very short pause to rest in what we've heard so far. So let us continue. I focus first on the potential of plant-based eating for the healing of the climate crisis, a key factor in intersectional food justice. Since the climate chaos we are experiencing right now is causing great suffering to Mother Earth herself and to many of her creatures, especially those who live in the poorest and most arid parts of the world. Earth's climate, as we know, is in free fall, as greenhouse gases trap infrared heat in the atmosphere to stabilize the climate and raise temperatures. This altered climate is in turn altering the nutrition of food grown in this changing context. For example, extreme heat is reducing the protein and iron in wheat and other grains, and increasing the quantity of lead, which is an alarming fact. Yet extreme heat is no longer abnormal, but expected. Pope Francis has spoken with urgency and alarm, describing our common home and Laudate Deum as collapsing and nearing the breaking point. Despite the clarity of scientists who point to the human culpability for the chaos, Pope Francis claims that our responses have not yet been adequate. Some effects of the climate are already irreversible, he writes, and we are approaching a critical point. But what's largely missing from our conversations about climate crisis is that animal agriculture, the raising of livestock for slaughter, is currently the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, making it one of the largest drivers of climate change. This is caused by the release of methane gas emissions from livestock production, which has been increasing precipitously around the globe, growing faster than any other greenhouse gas. Unfortunately, the global warming potential of methane is estimated to be 25 to 35 times greater than carbon dioxide. A leading cause is the 25 billion livestock currently grazing in pastures and confined in feedlots around the globe, belching methane gas and producing vast amounts of waste that generate additional methane and nitrous oxide. Pope Francis' alarm is not ill-founded, since to keep global warming under 1.5 degrees, a key goal of the Paris Climate Agreement, methane emissions need to drop by nearly half by 2030. Meeting this goal is out of sight, many experts say, without a cutback in the number of livestock raised for slaughter and a reduction in global meat consumption. But there's great hope. A recent study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences estimates that switching from a high meat diet to an entirely vegetarian or plant-based diet could reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of a typical person's food by some 47%. That's significant. Moreover, every effort counts here, even partial reduction, such as 2 plant-based meals a week or meatless weekdays, contributes to the whole. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis describes the climate as a common good, an essential condition for human life, belonging to all and meant for all. And he calls for changes of lifestyle, of production and consumption, in order to combat the human causes that produce and aggravate warming. Choosing to act, and in this case to eat on behalf of others, sends healing, mercy, and justice throughout the food system. A second call of intersectional food justice is the alarming expansion of deforestation across the planet, and especially in the world's greatest rainforests. The Amazon is dying, writes scientist Kim Hecox. Entire genetic libraries and symphonies of species, trees, birds, reptiles, insects, and more, eons in the making, are being wiped out to make room for methane-belching cows. The Amazon, historically a great carbon absorber, now releases more carbon than it stores, which adds to rather than reduces the climate crisis. Currently, clearing land to graze cattle by large agribusiness corporations accounts for 70% of recent deforestation in the Amazon rainforest, estimated at the loss of 10,000 acres every day, with additional forests being cleared to grow soy, precisely to feed livestock in other parts of the world. In Laudato Si', Pope Francis highlights how critical the Amazon and Congo basins are for the entire Earth and the future of humanity, referring to them as the richly biodiverse lungs of our planet because of the enormous quantities of oxygen they supply and the carbon they sequester. He underscores that it is almost impossible to appreciate these splendid resources, these pristine forests. When these forests are burned or leveled for the cultivation of pasture land, he claims, it takes only a few years for countless biodiverse species to be lost and large acres to become an arid wasteland. But this outcome is not inevitable. Although rainforests themselves can never be fully restored, a recent study in Nature Sustainability estimates that restoring other disfigured lands worldwide to native ecosystems or forests holds out a huge carbon opportunity, the potential to sequester quantities of carbon dioxide that could significantly offset decades of global fossil fuel emissions. Reforestation and agroforestry can respond to this carbon opportunity, but changes in dietary choices that reduce the worldwide demand for meat must make the way for reclaiming degraded forests. Among other aspects of intersectional food justice impacted by plant-rich eating is a restoration of human health. At a time when food-related health conditions are soaring, the choice of whole natural foods can contribute significantly to better health, to the blessings of well-being, energy, and fruitful endeavors well into our wisdom years. Here we speak not only of our own bodies, but of a potential flow of justice and healing into the whole healthcare system and its soaring price tag. A recent Oxford study on the future of food found that imbalanced diets low in fruit and vegetables and high in red and processed meat are responsible for the gravest health burden globally. The current overconsumption of meat in Western diets and increasingly in other countries multiplies the risk of obesity, including childhood obesity, diabetes, cancers, cardiovascular diseases, and other chronic diseases such as Parkinson's. Studies estimate that plant-rich food choices could save up to 8 million lives by 2050 and lead to substantial health care savings. Yet choosing such a diet flies in the face of a dearly held belief of many people that animal protein is crucial for good health, an assumption that has led many Americans to consume almost 2 times the daily intake of protein recommended by the National Academy of Medicine, which is 56 grams for men and 46 for women. The danger of overconsumption of animal protein is corroborated by the World Health Organization, claiming that only 10 to 15% of one's daily calorie intake needs to come from protein. A diet primarily of plants can easily meet that threshold. Beyond the health impact on millions of lives, savings in healthcare costs could be in the trillions of dollars. 1 trillion in annual healthcare costs and lost productivity, and upwards of 30 trillion when accounting for the value of lives lost. But the challenge in choosing a plant-centered diet for most people, I believe, is that eating and enjoying meat is laden with meaning, woven into the customs we share, the holidays we celebrate, the tastes that we associate with home and family, and the assumptions we make about maximum health and strength. All of these are highly significant. But changing people's complex and ingrained relationship with eating animal protein might take a lesson from a shift that has taken place here in the United States in recent decades, from a cigarette smoking citizenship to an almost universal practice now of tobacco-free public spaces. As with tobacco, new awareness of the negative aspects of meat consumption, coupled with changes in policy through citizen pressure on local and national governments, holds great potential. Currently, the US government pays large subsidies to meat and dairy industries. One estimate, some $59 billion since 1995, in contrast to a pittance to support plant-based alternatives. Moreover, government guidelines on healthy food choices favor animal products out of proportion with the best science available. Perhaps what is most important in making personal and family choices would be a new appreciation of delectable eating of Earth's most healthful foods, a new embrace of the beauty, color, diversity, and nutrition of plant-based choices, and a new commitment to a change in lifestyle that Pope Francis urges in Laudato Si. Human beings, he writes, are capable of rising above themselves, choosing what is good, making a new start, despite their mental and social conditionings, and embarking on new paths of authentic freedom. Moreover, he adds, a change in lifestyle could bring healthy pressure to bear on those who wield political and economic power, forcing them to consider their environmental footprint. When social pressure affects their earnings, Pope Francis continues, businesses clearly find ways to produce differently. Purchasing, in this case, choosing and purchasing food, is always a moral and not simply an economic act. Another dimension of intersectional food justice that would benefit significantly from plant-rich diets is the availability of food, both locally and globally. Statistics on hunger and acute food insecurity are staggering, and the number of persons faced with extremely limited food access increases daily. At the same time, demand for resource-intensive animal foodstuffs significantly limits the global availability of food. A single calorie of beef requires some 25 calories of grain or soy to produce. A calorie of pork protein requires 10 calories of other protein, while a calorie of chicken protein requires 9 units of plant-based protein. Studies show that growing healthy plant-based replacements for animal food sources could produce 20 times as much nutritionally similar food. That is, with protein comparable to the meat it replaces, which in turn frees up quantities of protein-rich food, soy, corn, grains, for countless persons in need of nutrition. Replacing all animal-based items in the US diet with plant-based alternatives could add enough food to sustain some 350 million hungry people. This would be an astonishing contribution to greater food availability and security. A key challenge in addressing food security as food justice is the principle that all people have the right not only to healthy food, but to culturally appropriate choices, as well as the right to determine their own food and agricultural system, and a right to be able to feed themselves with dignity. This, of course, is the principle of food sovereignty. Hence, making foods available through a substitution of plant-based replacements for animal protein sources does not address the whole of intersectional food justice, which must attend to the dignity and cultural preferences of all people. And it calls those of us concerned with greater food security to find ways to include and empower all people who need to be part of determining their own food. Increasing food availability must be paired with enabling a culturally rich diversity of food choices to unfold. The outcome of such culture-sensitive inclusion could bring a fresh and creative expansion of plant-focused agriculture and eating. Including the cultural desires of many people might result in new fruits and vegetables appearing in our garden and in our markets. New tastes and flavors might find their way onto our menus as we learn from each other the rich possibilities of an expanded multicultural plant-based cuisine. We're about to move now into the last two dimensions of an intersectional food justice, but let us take just a brief pause to simply rest in what we've been hearing. And so we continue. Water is life, Mini Wakoni. Water is life, Mini Wakoni. This chant, repeated by activists at Standing Rock, South Dakota, who were protesting the potential contamination of waters that are sacred to the Lakota Native peoples, captured a simple truth. Water is life, yes, and more than that. In the full meaning given to water by the Lakota people, water is alive, it has agency, it has personhood, it's a living relative. These Lakota understandings of water challenge the easy Western reduction of water to a resource, even a precious one. As in other situations where famous rivers, such as the Ganges in India, have been granted legal personhood, saying that water has personhood is to imply that it has a right not to be harmed. Water has a dignity that should not be violated. Today, animal agriculture is a major cause of water pollution, of contaminated drinking water, of toxic outbreaks of algae in local waterways across the country, and of the destruction of numerous species who inhabit our lakes, our rivers, our gulfs, and our oceans. Slaughterhouses that process packaged poultry, beef, pork, and other meats dump millions of pounds of harmful substances directly into our nation's rivers and streams, killing fish, poisoning water birds, and creating enormous dead zones. Today, there's a large dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, greater than the state of Connecticut, that has been caused by phosphorus and nitrogen pollution, which slaughterhouses release in high volumes. Dead zones are devoid of oxygen, forcing fish to flee or suffocate. Mini Wakoni, water is life. Water is a relative. This profound awareness of the livingness of water calls us to act on behalf of its integrity and its future. Polluting waterways is a desecration of life itself. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis speaks very beautifully of water as a caress of God, described by St. Francis of Assisi as Sister Water, who is very useful and humble, precious and chaste, and who joins us in singing the praises of the Lord. Along with the rest of the material universe, Pope Francis writes, water speaks of God's love and boundless affection. She is an integral part of the manifestation of God in the world, a constant source of wonder and awe. Contemplating water along with all God's creatures is to hear in her a message, a teaching which God wishes to hand on to us. Water is life. Embracing a plant-based diet while avoiding the blatant abuse of water produced by animal agriculture comes with its own call to protect all our precious water sources, including those used in plant-centered agriculture. Finally, a last area of intersectional food justice for us to take up concerns the well-being of all sentient animals, most especially those raised for slaughter. Humans consume more animals today than ever before. 64 billion animals are raised and slaughtered for food worldwide each year. That's approximately 1 million per hour. The average American consumes some 21,000 of these animals in his or her lifetime. Over the past decade, studies of animal sentience have continued to grow. It becomes clearer with each study that emotion, feeling, and cognition are traits of many, if not all, animals, including livestock in our pastures and feeding lots. This enables them to experience depression, anxiety, distress, pain, and suffering of other kinds. Yet in the name of efficiency, most animals raised for human consumption in the US today live out their days in concentrated animal feeding operations, known as CAFOs or factory farms, cruel and contaminated spaces in which the well-being of animals is sacrificed in the name of efficiency and productivity. Hundreds of thousands of chickens, pigs, sheep, cows are crushed into small spaces and live in putrid conditions. Each animal is considered a production unit, an it, but never a thou, and denied most of its basic needs for space, for clean air and water, for a chance to move about freely. As a matter of course, they are fattened on unnatural diets and undergo mutilation, often without any form of pain relief. Chickens, for example, who are selectively bred for rapid growth, often suffer chronic pain due to bone deformities and joint instability. They slide around in their small cages, burdened down by the breast meat they carry around that is a favorite for human consumption. One researcher refers to factory farms as factories of misery. Yet these large CAFOs crammed with single species of animals are exempt from current animal welfare regulations in most states in the United States. This in itself is alarming. What I'm describing here will never be seen by us in person, unless we are employed by one such operation. Given the cruelty involved, slaughterhouses are located in isolated places, and even employees are mostly denied access to the areas of greatest brutality. It's no surprise then that farm animal sanctuaries are appearing across the country, places where animals rescued from factory farms are given spaces of love and freedom to spend out their days. One such sanctuary in Nicasio, California, not far from my own home, named Rancho Compasión, describes its mission as twofold. One, providing a loving, lifelong home for rescued farm animals, and secondly, working to change public perception about animals typically regarded as food. Our sanctuary, reads their website, promotes a compassionate and sustainable lifestyle for animals, our planet, and our own health. This loving, compassionate stance reverberates in the words of Pope Francis in Laudato Si, when he calls for rejecting every tyrannical and irresponsible dominion of human beings over other creatures. The ultimate purpose of other creatures, he writes, is not to be found in us. Rather, all creatures are moving forward with us and through us towards a common point of arrival, which is God, in that transcendent fullness where the risen Christ embraces and illumines all things. Human beings endowed with intelligence and love and drawn by the fullness of Christ, Francis continues, are called to lead all creatures back to their Creator. In her book, Theological Ethics Through a Multi-Species Lens, Celia Dean Drummond invites us to envision a multi-species community as integral to human well-being. This means taking account of the particular paths to flourishing for each species, especially sentient animals, with which humanity is capable of entering into intimate relationships. Elizabeth Johnson takes this vision one step further. In her exploration of the communion of saints, she concludes that the traditional focus in this communion on human persons alone and their companionship in the Spirit needs today to be expanded to include other living creatures, ecosystems, and the whole natural world. The communion of holy people, she contends, is intrinsically connected to the community of holy creation, and they stand or fall together. This connectedness with all sentient beings is a gift of the Creator Spirit, poured out in the whole creation, enabling all created things to communicate with each other and with God, each in their own way. Together with all sentient animals, we live and move and have our being in God. Hence, the call to embrace a plant-rich diet is an invitation not only to a more sustainable diet, but a more compassionate one, not only to the healing and protection of individual sentient creatures, but to the integrity of the whole cosmic body of Christ. Food choices that honor the well-being of all sentient beings can build a world where greater consciousness of interspecies care and reciprocity abounds. A few words in conclusion. The call to modify our consumption of meat and embrace a plant-based diet is not new. It has resounded for decades and has today a sizable number of participants. In 2006, the United Nations published a major study entitled Livestock's Long Shadow that sounded the first alarm. The report demonstrated that 18% of all greenhouse gas emissions comes from animal agriculture, which makes the production of meat more costly to the environment than all forms of transportation combined. While the study fell short of recommended dietary responses, the call for change was clear. More recently, in 2017, Project Drawdown was published, documenting the 80 most promising ways to reverse global warming. Among the 80, embracing a plant-rich diet is number 4. The project concludes that in light of the urgency of stopping global warming, the case for plant-rich eating is robust. Drawdown concludes that it is possible to eat well in terms of both nutrition and pleasure while eating lower on the food chain, and therefore lowering emissions. And most recently, in 2020, the Laudato Si Action Platform launched by the Vatican called for a mobilization of the world's 1.2 billion Catholics to actualize Laudato Si's summons to an ecological conversion. With adopting sustainable lifestyles as one of the 7 goals, the platform recommends the adoption of more plant-based diet and the reduction of meat consumption as critical contributions to total sustainability in the next decade. Tonight, we add a new dimension to the conversation, seeing an increased embrace of plant-rich eating as a response to intersectional food justice. I hope this has been helpful to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So let's just take a moment. Thank you for those pauses during your sharing. So let's just take a moment to pause and just listen to what we heard within ourselves, what was moving us, what was touching us. And so I'd like to invite us, we might have some questions for Mary. We might, have a brief comment that might lead to a reflection that Mary might want to say in response. And I would just ask that we keep it as brief as we can so that if there are a lot of comments or questions, we'll have that opportunity to listen to everyone. So if you know how to raise your hand on the Zoom, I'll look for the hands, and I know Terry will help me. And if you don't, then just, wave your hand if you have your video on. And I'm looking, let me go through the screen just to see here. Okay. Yes, Terry.
Jerry's got his hand up.
I'll get us started off. Just first a comment. Mary, I've always been astounded that the founder of your community, Saint Madeleine Sophie Barat, said in the 19th century that humans are responsible for giving animals a life of as much pleasure as is possible. And I think that's an extraordinary insight.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And how it shifts the way we look at other creatures. That they're not there to occupy our plates, but we're here to ensure them a life of as much pleasure as possible. So she would be very proud of you. And my question is,
good.
Do you know of any religious communities, perhaps your own, but other ones that you might know of, that have been successful in encouraging members to reduce, to have a more plant-rich diet, to reduce their meat consumption?
I don't know of whole communities or even of provinces. I think in our community, at least, it's mostly been by example, people who make that choice and others who either question it or engage with it. I know in my community, I'm the only one who is strictly plant-based, but it's affected what we cook on when we come together for dinner, because people want to make sure I have enough to eat. So as a result, I'm not the only one in the end who actually does the plant-based meals. And certainly they make sure that there's always enough by way of vegetables or rice or whatever that I can be satisfied. So I think it often travels by by personal example more than by dictum, but it would be wonderful if a community really chose that. I think the strength that comes when you do it together, and especially if it's done reflectively and with real information, and certainly there's plenty of information, I think it can be a powerful witness, not only to each other, but to other people.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Donna, I notice you have your hand up.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Mary. You've shared so much. I don't even know where to begin, but so many things. I just need to take them away and sit with them for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But you had mentioned the word "it," and it reminds me of a little prayer, kind of a prayer poem when we call the earth an "it." And you know, I've been reflecting lately and on AI, which we know as artificial intelligence, but I like to think of it as authentic identity and heart-centered. And I actually wrote a letter to the editor about like, let's not lose heart. And that whole idea of when we break down relationships with each other, with Earth, with the animals, and we refer to them as its, I have no responsibility toward an it. I've hardened my heart, you know, but when I can begin to re-see that, you know, those gentle animals, I was so moved by some of your visuals, you know, those animals so tenderly being caressed by humans or by each other. And we can refer to them as a he or a she or by a name, you know, and not by an it. That puts us again in relationship. And that beautiful quote that you used, I don't know if I got it correctly, by Elizabeth Johnson, the communion of holy people is connected to the community of holy creation. Yes. Just so much you've shared that, you know, to take back. I myself, I am not I'm mostly a plant-based, but I lived in Guatemala for many years, and I actually saw the slaughter of animals. Here you don't see it. And when I actually realized when people bring you a chicken, what happens to the chicken? It's not a pet, you know. And I have for many years not eaten, I always say four-legged creatures, you know. But that whole idea of when you see something and it becomes a real relationship is it moves someone to change. Thank you.
Thank you,
I actually think that slaughtering a chicken is more honest than letting it be done at a slaughterhouse that we can't see.
Right.
Come in touch with the animal. You are in relationship. You are conscious that there's a sacrifice going on, even if you don't put it in those words, that this animal is now giving its life for me, is feeding
Right.
me. And I think that I know of people who grew up on farms where that was a regular occurrence, but I think it's a much better policy in a sense than simply allowing somebody else to do all the dirty work. And all we think of is what's in the packages in the grocery store, rather than this is a real animal. And as soon as you begin to realize that something's been handed over for you, you have a greater sense of relationship, as you were saying, Donna. You know, we lose the sense that it's an it. It's a being. Mm-hmm. We don't know them. We don't know where they live. We don't know how they've been treated. And we'd prefer not to know, because it is pretty disturbing. So, yeah. So I think, yes, I think cultivating those relationships. I have to admit, when I first changed from being vegetarian, which I was for many years, to being more completely plant-based, it was not animals that made the most impression on me. It was not the slaughter of animals that was my most important choice. But it has grown for sure over the years. It has become more and more important to me. And I love that image from Celia Dean Drummond of a multi-species community of life. That changes the way we think about the way we're related to each other. And that her saying that a multi-species community would be most helpful, most healthful for the human beings who are involved. Not just a nicety, but a real necessity to be in those kinds of multiple relationships.
Thank you. Yes, Jean, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mary. One little thing that we've done is the Meatless Mondays. It's a start.
Mhm. It's a
You
start.
know.
That's right. It's important.
Yeah. The other thing, though, I think, even when I taught students and they were all gung-ho about going vegetarian or whatever, I think it's important for people to know that their choices of plant-based are important to supplement the proteins that are needed. You can't just,
Yes.
so that's like a whole science even, or at least some kind of understanding of how to eat plant-based that supply the proteins that we need that we're not getting with the animal protein. The combination of things is really important to know for health and well-being.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and I think people are so geared towards meat protein and this overconsumption of meat protein that's almost twice as much as we actually need. I think that skews how people can imagine that possibly this would really be satisfying my need for protein. One of the groups that I follow and that I find very helpful is Forks Over Knives, which is an organization that started with the production of a movie, a film by that name, which really documented how two doctors came independent of each other to the same conclusion about the different effects of plant-based or meat-centered meals. And they both realized the value of the plant-centered diets and then began to incorporate them in their practice. That film is available on the website of Forks Over Knives. But Forks Over Knives has all kinds of things: news stories, health information, recipes, you name it. It's a very useful kind of thing for people who want to understand more about plant-based eating.
Thank you, Kelly. For those who want to check the chat box, Kelly put in the link to Forks Over Knives. So thank you very much. And then Wisdom, Wisconsin, there's a question. What's the art referred to? If I'm reading this correctly, what's the art referred to as multi-species community of life? So
maybe the article referred to?
Maybe the article, yes. Was that the author that you mentioned?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Just one moment. Let me get the exact title of the
Okay,
book.
yeah, that's great.
Yes.
Feel free to type your question in the chat if you would prefer.
Yeah. The author of that is Celia Dean Drummond, and the book is titled Theological Ethics Through a Multi-Species Lens.
Okay, I'm really bad at this. Say the author again, and then
Celia.
And then how do you spell her last name? Cecilia, did you say?
Celia.
Celia.
Celia. Dean, Deanne.
Ah, that was.
Hyphen Drummond, Drummond.
Okay, so if someone got that, you feel free to type that in the chat too for us. Thank you. Oh, yes, Salary. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thank you. This was so wonderful because you were so positive in what you offered us. Can you give us any resources that might help people who want to begin to eat plant-based diet? Any books or
I just
any?
mentioned Forks Over, pardon?
That one, yes, yeah.
Forks Over Knives. That's, in terms of a general resource, I think that's excellent. So much of what I pick up comes from all different kinds of articles that come in through various groups. That I don't have there's not another one that I can point to and say, here, this is it.
And I do know there are thousands of
So maybe
videos that are,
yeah, maybe somebody else has some good recommendations.
they're just by Googling. I think we can find some.
Yes, you can. You can.
I just put in the chat Bean Says How, which is a campaign from the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. It's a campaign to double global bean consumption by 2028.
Mhm.
And I just want to say thank you, Sister Mary, for sharing your thoughts today. I presented on this topic last month, and there's just so much alignment there. And I really appreciated what you had to share and how calmly you shared it. I think maybe I overwhelmed people last time with how much I shared, but yeah, I did also want to point out there is a term called reducitarianism. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's just the idea of reducing consumption of animal-based products, not necessarily have to do like black or white, like vegan or vegetarian, or just eat meat every day, but it's like, it's being more conscientious of our consumption and being more conscientious of the impact that it's having on the environment and on our health. So yeah, and if anybody is interested in that didn't hear my talk last month, I know it's recorded and shared on YouTube. So I'm happy to share more afterwards too as well. But thank you. That was a lot of great information you shared.
And
With
feel free to
regard to
put that
animals-
link in, if you want to.
Oh
Kelly.
yeah,
Feel free to put that link.
yeah,
in.
I'll find it. Mhm.
Yes.
There is another group that focuses on on animals, and that's called Creature Kind. One word, Creature Kind. I haven't worked with them a lot, but one of my students was quite connected with their work, which is bringing up, heightening awareness of how animals are treated, animals that are being prepared for slaughter.
So, Mary, and I kind of echo what everyone is saying. I just really appreciate what you said, and there's so much, and I've been thinking about this, but there's much to think about from your presentation. I don't know, and I don't know how to phrase this, but this whole idea of our eating and the buying of the food, and really seeing it in terms of relationship, the eating. We both Terry and I, or both our congregations, we really encouraged people over the summer to kind of reflect on a little booklet we put together on mindful eating with Thich Nhat Hanh's quotes on eating. And even one of the older sisters came up to me when I gave a little talk about it and introduced the booklet to them. And here she is now in her 90s. And she said, I never really thought before to really think that much about what I'm eating. So I really thank you for giving us this. Thanks for having this little prayer reflection, because it's so important to think about what I'm eating. And so I'm just wondering, this is so vague, but is there anything else or something that maybe you've already said and you want to repeat it again? This whole idea of relationships, because eating really is about relationship, whether it's the meal that we share with friends or family or in community, or whether it's really going deeper and realizing how we are partaking and becoming what we eat. I don't know.
I have to admit that the major place I shop for food is a big market. It's like a year-round indoor farmers market. And when you shop in that kind of a setting, you're so in touch with variety and color and shape and size and multiple forms of apples and whatever, that it really stretches your imagination in a way that a grocery store usually doesn't. I find it oppressive sometimes to go into a grocery store because so much of the store is full of processed foods that are so unhealthful. And a row of boxes or packages isn't very inspiring, isn't very relational. Whereas just the new apples that are coming into the market right now, it's so many different varieties. And the color, one of the things I just appreciate about shopping is just the feast of color that I experience each time. So I think that sense of relationship grows as we are in touch with food that feels relational to us. You know, that we can look at and appreciate the gift of food, of health that it's going to give us, as opposed to this is something that was definitely made by human hands.
Thank you. And I noticed Marianne. Thank you, Mary. Marianne, I don't know if you can turn your video on if you want to, but don't forget. Good. Thank you. All right.
Mute. I'll unmute also. Just to pick up on what Mary just said. In the book, The Meal That Reconnects, regarding the variety of foods that we see, there is a footnote which came from a quote, I think, or the section where Vandana Shiva was offering some information. And in there, the footnote was to a video, a DVD entitled Seeds, that talks about the multiple variety and the diminishment now. And what hit me on that one is when we talk about endangered species, most of us probably picture animals that are endangered, but to see the variety of foods, of seeds presented, and the implications for how food and seed is used, because I think it is in that video that there's reference to a quote by Kissinger when he was in Secretary of State position. If you want to control a nation, control the oil. If you want to control a people, control the food. And Vandana Shiva added, and if you want to control the food, control the seed. So that opens up a whole thing of where is your food coming from? And one of the things that has not made it through the legislative process is the enforcement or the practice of, there's been legislation for cool labeling, country of origin labels, which helps the consumer who wants to eat as close to home as possible.
Yes, for sure. Seeds are such a wonderful source of inspiration, among other things, the varieties of seeds. And Vandana Shiva has written a whole lot about that, as you know, and the concern for the seeds. And it's interesting, I have a number of students from Africa in my classes. And the situation of food in Africa is quite dire because big philanthropists like Bill Gates are trying to convert Africa to the Green Revolution that should have died years ago. And a woman in my community who's from Malawi, in conversation with me, realized that the corn seeds that belong to her people have been lost because they're buying these hybrid seeds that are being sold to them at great expense from the United States. And the seeds, she went home to find who had some of those seeds. But I think because most of us don't do much, maybe we garden, but we don't do a lot of agriculture. We sometimes forget how critical the seeds are and what an incredible variety of seeds exist.
That's right.
Yeah. So thank you for that comment, Marianne. Of course, there's efforts to make huge seed libraries now to keep track. That's one of the things that Vandana Shiva does at Naftanya, is to collect seeds from all over India to preserve the seeds that could easily get lost in the way agriculture is being practiced right now.
Thank you. And thank you, Marianne. Did you want to say something else, Marianne?
Well, just relative to collecting seeds, there is an organization of long-standing in Decorah, Iowa. I'm speaking to you from Wisconsin, from Decorah, Iowa, which is called Seed Savers Exchange. And so organizations like that, for a while, our local library was starting a Seed Savers Exchange, not under their title. I mean, using their title. They were making a library of seeds. I don't think I think COVID wiped that out. And I don't know if it's coming back, but those kinds of efforts. And then just one comment to the person who asked about recipes. We were listening to that. I simply Googled forks over knives. And the immediate thing that came up was plant-based recipes. So simply Googling that will get you to it.
Tons of them on that website.
Right.
And you can get on their list, so you get about a whole set of them every week. I just received a list of something like 50 different ways to fix sweet potatoes. And they're good recipes, and they have beautiful pictures, colored pictures that go with them, so you know what you're getting into.
Anne, thank you. Thank you for that little conversation there. And Anne, yes. Don't forget to unmute. Yeah.
Trying. Okay, got it. Trying to. No, it was just a comment what you said about that it didn't bother you so much, the killing, I think of killing of animals. And it reminded me when I was a novice, I got sent to South Africa, and I am eternally grateful. One of the things I learned there, I had to learn a lot of things living without running water and electricity and all that. But I learned how to slaughter chickens, how to raise them from the egg to the pot. And I remember we would slaughter one if we had company. And sometimes they would say, oh, no, take it behind the hut, because if they see you do it, they won't want to eat it. And I remember thinking, that's not right. I kind of was annoyed at that. Like, how dare you come and eat the food and find it offensive to see where it comes from? And I was always grateful that I did learn. And I like that thing of reducitarianism, because I like to put like a tiny bit of meat to give flavor to a large quantity of vegetable or beans, or I ate beans all week, by the way. But it just seemed honest, like you said, too. And I never killed anything bigger than a chicken, but it seemed to me that you ought to be able to do it if you want to eat meat. And maybe that's what taught me. Sometimes when I'll eat, I really like pork chops. I really do. But I'll eat a little bit, and I'll often say thank you to the lowly pig or something. It teaches me to be grateful to the animal. Like you talk about a relationship. I say, well, thank you, Grace, for the meal and all, but I'll eat it and I'll say thank you to the chicken, or thank you to especially the lowly pig, because the people I've lived with for many years despise pigs. But anyway, just a comment to say I like what you said there. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Well, thank you for this rich conversation. So let's just take a moment to see if there's something either still burning within someone that wants to be said, or some other comments.
Well, I'll just add.
Yes, Jean.
I'll just add, since the community has embraced Meatless Mondays, and, people find it hard sometimes, you can eat seafood, I suppose, but to encourage plant-based eating, we have a weekly newsletter that we put out. And so I would look up recipes that I felt were easily accessible. The ingredients were easily accessible, that were healthy and plant-based, and I would publish them in our weekly newsletter. So that would give people, an easy way to prepare a plant-based meal. I don't know how many people use them, but I did get some comments, people were grateful. So I think sometimes people need that little extra encouragement. And you have to put it right there in front of them so that they realize it's not as hard as it sounds, and it can be very nutritious and delicious besides.
Thank you.
Well, I think because in our culture, if someone's planning a meal, usually the first thing they plan is the meat. Well, I'll have chicken for dinner tomorrow night. And then you think of the other things in relation to the chicken. So there's some shifting that has to go on when you say, well, what's the center, or what's the What's the
Mhm.
main thing that's part of the meal? So it's thinking really differently about food than within the patterns that get established in terms of a meat eating community.
Thank you. So you know what I'd like to do, if there's no other comment, I'm just wondering if you want to take a second. And Mary, this has been extremely rich. And I'm really in a learning process here. So I would invite anyone who wants to either type into the chat box, or maybe if you unmuted yourself, and think of either one word or a phrase that kind of stays with you, as you know, or has stayed with you, or when you think about it now, kind of jumps out at you from this evening. So, there's a lot. The water is life, and thank you for reminding me, is a relative. And that whole idea of the multi-species community as integral to human well-being. So I'm just going to invite us, as a good way of just kind of trying to pull this rich conversation together and presentation, either in the chat or just calling out loud a phrase or a word.
Well, there.
Seeds.
It's
Plant-based.
And if you're,
Multi-
I'm sorry, Mary.
Multi-species community of life. Great option.
Thank you. And if,
Letting go.
we're reading the chat box, that community of holy
Mhm.
creation, respect for life, relationship, plant-based, reverent communion, great options, pause, food and culturally rich, dignity, kinship, conscious living. So Mary, you've helped us connect and go deeper into all this. So I appreciate this, and you can tell from these phrases, we have really appreciated your sharing. Terry, we're just very grateful to you, because Terry introduced us to the book, your book, which is very, very rich. And we're hoping to maybe have a book discussion come winter, spring of next year. But Terry, I'm going to let you make any concluding remarks if you would like to.
No, I just want to mention again that we will be sending out the recording, and this time I'll also include the chat, because there were so many rich suggestions in it. So look for that tomorrow.
Mhm.
And I just echo Carol's words of thanks to Mary. Her book is one of the best I've read in years. And as I said, brings together so many things in a way that's so compelling. So Mary, you've been a great gift to us and to the world.
Well, thank you all. It's just really been a pleasure to be in conversation with you tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mary Ann, did you have something? Was that your hand being raised?
No, I just didn't know how to turn it off.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks to all.
Thanks. Good night,
Very
everybody.
nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry.